how do we get you to connect with people and let them know that you care about what they do as much as they do? How do we get you to do that? And it was him tapping into that personal, passionate space, which, especially for a man, was pretty vulnerable. But he was just like, okay, well, let's see what we do with this.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited because today we have a special guest. We have confident communication coach, Gina Molinari, better known as Gina Mo. And what Gina does is she specializes in helping people and entrepreneurs really get clear and confident with becoming the face of their companies. And she does this through a combination of mindset and strategy work that they can master really for their online presence. She combines her unique experience of classical singing. She's a classical singer, like opera, like seriously classical singer, with her digital marketing and emotional intelligence skills and training to really help her clients break through their fears, become visible, and really step into their strongest communication skills. And Gina is also a TEDx speaker coach as well as a keynote speaker. Gina, welcome to our platform. Hi, Gina. How are you?
Excellent. God, I love your energy in that intro. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, I'm excited to have you because you know what? Really, to succeed in this century, it is about communication skills. I mean, especially considering the economy that we just got out when unemployment was so low, right? You had to be likable for people to even work for you, right? So communication is so, so important. Gina, tell me a little bit about what you do with your clients and your work and your really what you bring to this world with your communications.
Yeah. So like you said, I have this really unique kind of combination of things in my background. And what I realized at some point after kind of pivoting from thing to thing is that ultimately there's just this love of language that I have. And the reason that I love language, whether it's the verbal or the nonverbal kind, is because that's how you connect with people. That's how you really bond with them and really get them to understand you, or you get to understand them, and storytelling, like all of these amazing, incredible sort of things that bond us. And, having gone through what I've gone through, I take that and I just allow people who know better, they read the books, they watch the webinars, they've done great things, they're smart people, but they lack the confidence or the strategy to actually put themselves really out there. And when we focus on the simple vehicle of language itself and harnessing the power of that, we can change our mindset and we can utilize best practices of strategy to actually create a new reality for us, which is really, really freaking cool to me. So, I just watch people and the way they change their language, even though they change nothing else in their business, they don't change prices or any of those other things. It's amazing how all of a sudden they're succeeding and they're gaining more momentum, and all of a sudden they're doing these new things that are opening up new doors for them. So language to me has just always been this really fascinating, really, heart-centered sort of activity for me.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I've seen people in the same industry. I've seen them, and being a TEDx speaker, I'm sure you've seen it too. And you'll have one guy that gets up and like he'll practically just might as well just turn around and read his slides, what I mean? And then you'll have another guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's so prolific, and then you wonder the difference between the $50 an hour consultant and the $500 an hour consultant, just like how they communicate, right? And how they engage their audience.
And that's the thing, right? As you pointed that out, like people can be really smart and have all of this great knowledge. Like Deepak Chopra is incredibly, inspirational in all of this when you read his writing. When you listen to him talk, wow, is it boring? And so it's really, really hard to engage with it. And it's like, you really need both things. And that's where my performance background actually comes really into play, because it is a performance. You are, creating something beautiful and this kind of artistic experience with the knowledge. It has to be the combination for it to really land and stick with people.
That is really interesting that you say that communication in some ways is a performance.
Yes.
I've never heard that before. Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
That's actually not my original idea. I'll admit that. So I had gone actually where I met Mike Michalowicz. So you and I were talking about this.
Love Mike.
Love Mike.
Hi, Mike.
I met him at a event he was guest speaking at with Michael Port, who is an actor that turned into a public speaking coach. And he does very similar things. So he takes his acting skills and he talks about how every opportunity for us to talk to another person, whether it's over the phone, a podcast like this, on a proper stage, an interview, a date even, it is all a performance. And if you're not being your best self and being articulate and varied and interesting, then it falls flat for people. Like, you have to really get them to be in it with you. Otherwise, when we talk just like this, we eventually stop listening and it just becomes this noise that we can kind of tune out. Like you can tune that out very easily if you don't have that vocal variety alone. So all of the combination of things just makes you that much more interesting and to watch and to listen to.
I love that. So how do you take somebody that is a monotone professor that like loves a laser pointer and like by the time he's done, you memorize his backside? How do you take that person and make them into this prolific performer?
Well, I mean, the first thing you got to do is diagnose where that's coming from. Why are you so in your head about it? Because that's often the issue, is it's a lack of presence. But why are you not present? Are you nervous about getting all the information right, having all your ducks in a row, being seen as stupid? Is there some sort of fear of judgment that's coming up that you're not in the moment and really able to enjoy it versus, really kind of just going off whatever you remember in your script? Or is it something deeper? Is it just that you're really, really afraid to be up there and there's nothing else you can concentrate on, including your body and your tone of voice, other than just getting through this and white knuckling the whole experience? It's amazing to me how many smart people, really engaging, interesting people one-on-one get up in front of a room and they're terrified and they become a completely different person. But also the opposite is true, where like being one-to-one is actually really intimate. And so that's scary. And it's like, oh, well, now there's this interaction where like I see your face where normally the lights are blocking it out or something. So we have all these different tendencies that pop up for us in different contexts, even video. Like if you're a good public speaker, but you're on video, it's a very different experience. Like you don't have that visual and energetic feedback. So I have a couple clients right now where, they've done Toastmasters, they've done all the things, they're keynote speakers, but they're like, I really suck on video. Now that I'm trying to go into this online space because I'm forced to, like now I don't really know how to do that in a way that feels good and feels like I'm being valuable and interesting. So let alone the strategy when it comes to the actual showing up, that's their fear that comes up.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I remember when I first started doing camera work, I had this GH5, right? And I would turn it around to the monitor face me. And like suddenly I would just be like, I can't talk for more than 5 minutes, right? And like literally I would just have nothing to say when I turned that monitor around. So how do you, I guess, get over yourself, right? Like how do you talk to the GH5 when the GH5 doesn't talk back?
Yeah. Well, I do have a couple tricks for that. One of which is my favorite. You literally take a face of some kind or eyeballs of some kind, like a sticker or a piece of paper, and put it over your webcam. You got to get yourself used to treating it like it's a person. So even if it's a picture behind it or something, like if it's too intense to look directly into the camera, but I'm always, even if I'm just having a conversation with somebody like through a Zoom call, I'm always looking at the camera because I need you and want you to feel like I'm connected to you. And now it's to a point where I have enough practice with it where it does feel natural to look at that and I can see it in my peripheral vision like, oh yeah, you're nodding at me. So really being able to practice treating it like a person is like one of the first and easiest things you can do. But it's also a matter of just really allowing yourself to find things to ground you and anchor you. Like what gets you out of your head long enough to take a leap of faith? What gets you out of your head long enough to do something that scares you, but be like, all right, I guess we're doing this, whether it's deep breathing or singing or dance party or whatever that looks like for you, right? Giving yourself that opportunity to get out of your head, get into your body so that you can interact with a camera the same way you would as a person.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So what are some tips in terms of, and I want to break this down in two parts. One is how can we use communication to increase our sales in COVID-19,
Mhm.
right? And engage our audience and engage potential customers. And two is what would be a strategy to appear and become comfortable with really doing this, right? And talking to people. What is a good strategy to even do that?
Yeah. Okay. So first thing, let's talk about sales and growing that, right? So I believe that the most important thing you can do, especially in this space now where everybody's kind of disjointed from each other, is make it tie in the personal elements of it. Get authentic, get vulnerable. And I know in some spaces you're like, well, that doesn't feel appropriate. That doesn't feel like it really makes a lot of sense. But let me tell you why that works. So I had this one client in particular who had just quit his day job to go full in on his thing. He was running out of savings money or whatever. And he's like, Gina, I have one client right now. Like, I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage the next month. And I have family to feed. Like, what do I do with this? And so I did an exercise with him because I had a suspicion of what was going on. I was like, I want you to talk to me. I'm going to mute myself for 5 minutes. I want you to talk to me about who you are, what you do, whatever you feel comfortable telling me. And what we realized was in that 5 minutes, it took him 2.5 minutes to talk about anything personal about himself. Anything personal. So he first was a father, and he was a brother and a son, and like all of the things he was to everybody else. But he only started talking about his passions and things that lit him up and the reason that he even did his business 2.5 minutes in. Think of how many elevator pitches that equivocates to. By then, 4 people have stopped listening to you. So we did an exercise where we started changing the way he pitched himself. We're like, okay, we're going to leave your prices as is. You're obviously still going to these networking meetings, like you're doing all the things. How do we get you to connect with people and let them know that you care about what they do as much as they do? How do we get you to do that? And it was him tapping into that personal, passionate space, which, you know, especially for a man, was pretty vulnerable. But he was just like, okay, well, let's see what we do with this. And after just a month of working together, he had 4 more clients on his roster. And then he had more meetings in the following week than he had had in like the 3 months combined. All he did was start talking about himself and really bonding with people in a way that got him remembered. It was a way that people understood, okay, you know what? Maybe this guy doesn't cost, you know, as little as this other guy, but he cares. I know I can rely on him. Like they knew they could trust him with their product because he was, you know, doing craft beer deliveries or whatever it was. So only by changing that, he was able to grow his sales because he built a relationship quickly. And that is the key really to making more sales in this space is you have to make that deep bond quickly, not this superficial like, hey, how are you? What do you do? That works even less in the online space than it does at a networking meeting where everybody's wearing name tags. It is just so ineffective and so impersonal. And honestly, it's frustrating after a while. You know, you're just like, oh, I feel like I'm doing all this work and nothing's happening. Well, that's why you got to get a little original with it. And the best way to get original is by tapping into that personal space. How do you make it authentic and vulnerable? I was just messaging with like 2 or 3 people just before we hopped on the phone here, and you know, just getting to know them. Like, what do you do? What are you really excited about right now in your life? Because right now we need all the joy that we can possibly get. And I mean, I was only having a conversation with them for about 5 minutes, but I know so much about them already, and we bonded already. And I'm already thinking of ways I can collaborate with some of them. Like, that's what the power of communication can be, but it has to be that authentic space. And if you can get vulnerable in certain spaces, that's even more, because you're just like, okay, she knows where I've been. She knows what I've been through. This is a person I trust to lead me through the fire, or whatever that looks like. Again, it depends on the industry, but that for sales is just so imperative. So remind me what part 2 is again.
You know, I'm going to actually ask you another question too, because you really said something really interesting in that. You said the word vulnerability. And that's scary because, like, you know, you can get on stage and you can be vulnerable and nobody will hopefully remember it. And they can't prove you said it, right? But, you know, in 2020, getting vulnerable means having a permanent imprint of your vulnerability out there someplace in cyberspace. Let's talk about vulnerability. Let's talk about what that means. And let's talk about when maybe some examples of when we might not want to be vulnerable, right? Tell us a little bit about that, Gina.
Yeah, so vulnerability, you know, there's kind of 2 schools of thought I found on this, where some people are like, you know, not everybody deserves your vulnerability because they can possibly use it against you or something like that. But I don't believe that, because I think there's a difference between vulnerability and having a raw feeling about an experience you've been through. So as a speaker on a stage, especially, you don't want to fall apart and then leave other people to take care of you. You're supposed to make them feel safe, have them be led to a place of inspiration and make them feel something, but then bring them somewhere really strong. So at the end, the call to action is that much more powerful for them. That emotional experience is really important. So you can't do that if you're not ready to talk about it. So I'm not saying, you know, share the divorce that you're going through as of only last week and falling apart on stage or something like that. That's not responsible as a speaker and as a communicator. But to talk about something that maybe is a sore subject for you, something that's important to you, that is personal, like deeply personal, that you can talk about in a coherent way and an effective way that can be inspiring for somebody else, that's important. And I always think it's important to remind people that, you know, the fear that we have about being vulnerable and putting our, you know, scars and warts or whatever you want to call them out there, that is far more important for somebody to have a breakthrough than my fear. If I succumb to the fear and say, oh no, I'm not comfortable sharing that, then I'm saying that my fear is more important than your breakthrough by listening to that. And if I'm ready to share it, if I'm able to share it, that's just not fair. That's not fair to that person because you have no idea how that can possibly change their life by them sharing that information. So, I've struggled with my weight my entire life. And I've been on podcasts before where I've proudly declared my weight even in the middle of my journey, which for a lot of women is really, really vulnerable and scary, and they would never do it, or their age. I've shared things about going through an eating disorder. I've shared things about going through significant debt. I've talked about all these things because even though they may not be fully healed or realized, or I'm not at my goal with some of those things, I know that it's important for other people to hear it. I know it's important for somebody else to hear that, you know what? And it's even important to hear about it in the moment because it's like, oh no, I can be comfortable talking about it while I'm still working. I think there's a lot of strength in that. There's a lot of strength in being able to say, yeah, you know what? I've been where you are. I've made a lot of progress, but I'm still struggling. I'm still pushing forward. And it's okay that I'm doing that because look how successful I can still be. It's why I don't edit my videos. When I do video work of any kind, I don't edit out coughing or stumbling over my words or something like that. I think it's important. You need to see that you can be imperfect and incredibly valuable and incredibly inspirational, educational, whatever it is you're trying to be. So that vulnerability is really more an interpretation in your mind. But to say that my fear of being vulnerable with you matters more than what you can get out of that is just cruel, personally, I think.
I love that. So really using vulnerability as a tool to serve another.
Absolutely.
I love that. I have to admit though, I'm not on that bandwagon. I love my Omar Farouk. I mean, edit the video as much as you can, man. Take off 10 pounds if you can. I love video editing.
And you know what? That's the way I see it. And I coach other people through that. And maybe it doesn't work for them, so we can find out another way to do it that works best. But I find in having these new building relationships to have sales and things, it really is one of the most effective and quick ways to deeply connect with somebody to make those new connections in sales.
Definitely, it definitely is. And I mean, it really helps you relate, right? It helps you relate to that other person to show that you have a solution, right? That can help them with that. So let's talk about communication, like in terms of team, right? Because, we're all virtual now, right? We're all virtual for the most part. I mean, there's some that are still in retail that have to be in physical form. And even then communication is changing, right? Because now things are faster and socially distanced, right? We can't get up in your face and explain things anymore. You got to shout across 6 feet. Tell me about what are your tips in communication towards your team and management and really being able to move your teams in directions based on communication?
Yeah, I think some of the most important sort of nuggets from that comes from this idea of navigating confrontation within the team, right? Navigating conflict or any of that. And the best way that we can do that is to not escalate the emotion of the situation. Because when emotions get into it, we lose all sense of rationality and then people aren't listening. That's when we really run into a problem, whether it's between team members and we're trying to mitigate, or if it's between a superior and an employee, something like that. So really learning how to look at things as clinically, I guess is the best word I want, as clinically as possible, looking at the facts. Okay, it's not about how you made me feel by doing this. It's not about, what you intended by this or what sort of passive aggressive sort of behavior it might have been. It's truly about what transpired here, what actually happened, so that I can look at it and respond to you in a way that's not from an emotional and possibly defensive place. So being able to do that and look at every situation possible that way really, really helps. And, when we're in this space, I personally believe it's always best to do it verbally because you have that connection. You can hear people's tone of voice, whereas in writing, obviously some of that can get misconstrued. But if you know that you're somebody who gets riled up really easy, maybe to start, you do it in writing because you know that you have the opportunity to edit yourself. And you give yourself time to edit your response, to really go through it, maybe even ask somebody for their feedback. How would you respond to this sort of message if you were to receive it? And really being able to sandwich any sort of criticism with positive behavior as well, so that people don't feel attacked by it. You have no idea what somebody's been through in their personal experience to know how something may trigger them in some fashion. And it's not our responsibility to be responsible for everybody's triggers, but we can be as clear as possible in the intention that we're trying to share. So we can't control their perception, but we can do everything in our power to be as clear in the intention. So if we're doing everything we can, if we're going, written versus word or word versus written to give ourselves that best opportunity, ultimately we have to stay neutral to the fact that they may not respond to it well and not to escalate the situation from there.
I love that. I love that. And I have to ask you, Gina, how do
Yes.
you go from like opera singer to communication coach?
Well, and how do you go from New Jersey to Ohio?
Obviously brilliant at it, but it's such a unique transition to do.
No, so actually so I grew up in New Jersey, and my dream was to be a singer. I never even specifically wanted to be an opera singer. I just went to voice lessons in high school and realized I had an affinity for it because that's what my teacher, how she taught that style. And I went to college to be an opera singer. That was what I got my undergraduate in. I went to this prestigious conservatory-like school. It was part of my curriculum to sing with the New York Philharmonic in the choir. Like I've done these crazy things. I've obviously have this gift and talent, but I have terrible performance anxiety singing in front of other people. And I've always known that about myself. And I've just kind of bootstrapped it, hoping that one day it would go away, but not actually doing the work to make it go away, never addressing any of these sort of internal struggle. So when I graduated from my undergraduate, I waited a year, I continued taking lessons. And for graduate school, I was working at the school. So I was like, oh, this is great. I'll get tuition remission. I just got to get into the program. I got to audition and then I'll be good. I'll have a free graduate degree. Well, my school didn't let me in for the graduate program. So the place that trained me didn't want me. And when it comes to auditions or public speaking or anything, I mean, you know that you can't do perfect, but you know you can do, like you can be at a place to do your best you could possibly do that day. And I truly believed I did the best I could have done that day. So it broke me. And I thought to myself, shit, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but if the place that trained me doesn't want me, I do not have a future here. This is just not fixable. And so I licked my wounds for a while and then wound up going to grad school to do performing arts administration at NYU. And I got my master's in that and fell in love with marketing there. And then marketing sort of turned into entrepreneurship, which turned into social media strategy, which turned into blog writing, which all of these things. And I had a lot of shame and guilt around pivoting so much. But what I came to realize maybe 4 years ago or so was that I was really building a tool belt for everything that I'm doing now, that the singing served a purpose. Like I said, all those performance skills, vocal health skills, when people speak, if they don't speak with a proper breath, they can tire themselves out and do damage to their voice. Hello, Tony Robbins. So, being able to take care of your instrument, those are all things that I can teach somebody now. And the guilt of going from thing to thing, I recognized along the way, I was like, wait a minute. It's always been about language. That's why singing mattered to me, is because, and that's also why it was scary, was because I was raw and vulnerable, sharing an emotion with people. You can't avoid feeling a feeling when you breathe that deeply to sing like an opera singer. You just can't. That's why, sometimes if you ever take a deep breath when you're on the verge of really upset, and then finally you take a deep enough breath, you start to cry. That's the same experience. You're finally connecting to your body. You're not able to stop it. So I realized that all of those things I've done since have been an iteration of a love of language, a love of communication, a love of connecting to people and talking about the value of something. First, it was the value of music, then businesses, then, whatever it is that I was writing for, or the social media strategy, putting people out there. That's always what's been important to me. And so now, like, public speaking has never been scary to me, but now when I do keynote speeches, I sing for them because it allows me to conquer my fear. It allows me to showcase that you do get to do the same thing and continue working on it and break through it, because it can serve you in another way. It may not make sense to you now, but it can. So it was a weird, convoluted journey up to that point. But to me, it just all makes sense after like that one moment of, oh, language, I get it now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're using your talent to really give someone that gift, right? I think I've seen a video of you sing, and it was like absolutely beautiful. And just to see, to have a speaker come out and sing for you, it's like, it just throws you off, right? And you're like,
It does.
and then you're like, this is really, and then we're connected, because I'm just in love with the singing. So that is amazing. So Gina, if I could ask you, if there's one piece of advice, and it doesn't have to be related to communication, it can be related to anything, life, business, that you can leave our audience with today, what would that piece of advice be?
It doesn't necessarily correlate strongly to the conversation we've had, but I always feel called to share it. Lewis Howes coined this phrase, and I like to share it and live by it now. Don't be perfect, be patient. And to me, that's always been this representation of like, you can do the work, you can be doing everything right, and it's just not coming out the way you want it to. But sometimes you just got to be patient. Sometimes it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that you just need to wait a little bit longer for something else to fall into place, for it to make sense, or for you to then change and modify it in some way. And for me, a recovering perfectionist, that has been just such a pivotal sort of mantra to live by.
That is beautiful. And it's something that's missing right in this world now, that a lack of patience. We all want things yesterday. We want our marketing to have worked yesterday, our experiments have worked yesterday, our business to be where they are 10 years from now, yesterday, and so patience really is very critical. So thank you. You're right. Just to enjoy the ride, right? Enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
Not the destination, It's interesting because most of us don't enjoy the destination anyway, enjoy the ride more.
Well, it's because we're not enjoying the ride. If we're not enjoying the ride, then we don't see the value of what is it? They say that the goal you're chasing is because of what we think it's going to make us feel, right? We learned that from Kelly. We think that money is going to bring us peace. We think that the promotion is going to make us feel powerful. We think blah, blah, blah. But when we get there and we don't feel that way, we're left empty. So we wonder, okay, well, what did we do wrong? Then we start chasing more things, and it's never enough because it's never actually the thing that we're going for.
Right, definitely. It's very beautifully said. And Gina, how can our audience and our viewers, how can they contact you to work with you, to learn more about what you do, to learn to be better communicators on stage, on camera, or even in management in life, right? Where can they contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. GinaMolinari.com is my website, my best place to reach me. You can see my services that I offer there. And Facebook is usually the best way to reach me on social. So facebook.com/TheGinaMo.
Oh, I love that. The Gina Mo on Facebook. That's so neat.
People can't spell my name, so I just tried to make it easy for them.
All right, I'm gonna let Gina spell it for those of you guys that are looking it up right now and don't have the ability to see the notes.
Yeah, it's GinaMolinari.
Love it. Thank you, Gina, so much. Thank you for sharing your morsels of wisdom with us and helping us be better communicators right now in 2020.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.